Welcome back. Today we're going to talk about Windows artifacts and specifically what sort of artifacts Windows just keeps around. So Windows generates tons and tons and tons of data. I mean, lots of data that just gets hidden everywhere. And everything from user behavior, system events, application user usage, network activity, um, independently of whatever a user's intentions are or were. They're created automatically. They persist after a user tries to delete evidence. They've been used quite a bit to chase down individuals who have performed malicious activities. I remember there was a article or there was a story a while ago where they traced down the creator of a macro virus from Microsoft Word because or it wasn't a macro virus. They traced down the creator of a specific virus because the compiler added in specific metadata into the compiled executable that allowed them to trace the user back to, or trace them back to the actual user. There's also like dollar bills in the US. If you look, there's a combination of how things are laid out on side of the bill itself. It's known as the Urian constellation. And that is so if you take that bill and try to scan it or do anything with it, the software will detect that and refuse to manipulate that particular image. So there's a lot of things out there, and Windows tends to create just a ton of information. So the Windows registry has everything. Everything goes through the registry. And there's a lot of information that just kind of sticks around in there. You have prefetch files, and we'll look a little bit at the prefetch files, but every time that you run a program, there's a prefetch that is created. And this contains information about file path, launch count, last 8 run times, libraries loaded. Even if you delete the executable, it still stays in the prefetch directory. Now, eventually that does get cleaned up, but it can stick around for a very long time. The reason for the prefetch files is actually not just to track users, but back on older computers, when you had a mechanical hard drive, Microsoft created prefetch specifically so that when you launched a program, if it was a commonly used program, it would create a copy of that so it can load it a lot quicker the next time. It could prefetch the information so it didn't take as long for the next execution. You also have LNK or shortcut files. Whenever you open up a file, it will create a shortcut which will record the path, timestamp, file size, volume serial number, MAC address of the file's original location, and everything else. And then finally, the event logs. There's a ton of event logs which store everything from applications to security, your system logs, log in, log out. Anytime that you see that UAC prompt to run as an administrator, it will log that into your event log. Anytime you log into a computer, it will log that. Anytime you open up a program, a lot of times it will log that as well. So just looking at the registry, you have, so the HKLM is HKey local machine, and there's a software key inside of that where you can see the installed programs, version numbers, all sorts of stuff. And I've used the registry when trying to create installers for applications, looking in the HKey local machine software for where it specifies certain configuration settings. There's also the, like under HKey local machine, under system, current control set, enum, USB store. So that's USB storage devices that were ever connected, including all the information about that. There's the recent docs location under HKey current user. That's the HKey CU. That's for that current logged in user. There's also the paths typed directly into the Explorer bar. There's under HKey local machine, you have your TCP/IP interfaces, and that'll have your IP addresses, DHCP, connection time, your Win login to where you can change or see specific things. So there's a lot in the registry, and you should definitely go exploring through the registry. Again, don't make changes to the registry if you don't know what you're doing, because it is easy to break your system. But just looking through the registry, seeing what's in there, seeing what you can and cannot see, um, and what information is stored is quite eye-opening. Prefetch files. So, like I mentioned, prefetch files, these were created back in the day to make computers run faster, but they still exist and they're still stored on the system. You can turn it off, but people rarely do because they don't know exactly. I mean, most people don't know about prefetch files. But under your Windows folder, there's a prefetch folder. It is secured so that not anybody can access it. It does require administrator permissions to actually access it, but it will record the run timestamps, total run count, DLLs, files that were loaded, execution after deletion, which will record an executable that ran even if the executable has been deleted, volume serial numbers, things like that. So there's a number of tools out there which will list this information. So Win Prefetch View from Nursoft, PE Command from Eric Zimmerman, Autopsy will also analyze it. It does say Prefetch is disabled by default on SSDs, although that's not always entirely true. I looked at my system and Prefetch was enabled, and I went ahead and disabled it. It's not as needed with SSDs anymore, just because drives are fast enough to where you don't have to worry about clicking on a program and then waiting for several minutes for it to actually load it, because it has to go seeking through the hard drive. But it does still have some usefulness. However, a lot of people, if it is still enabled by default, which again, most systems it does enable it by default, that will have quite a bit of forensics information that can be used. Then we get to shortcut files, and those are created automatically under the users folder, app data, roaming, Microsoft Windows, recent. And this will have all sorts of information, the target file path, the file size, timestamps, the volume label, serial number, the machine ID, if it's stored with NetBIOS, may have the network MAC address, we'll have the creation time. There are tools out there, LE Command, LNK Analyzer, Autopsy also will analyze it. But shortcut files, those tend to stick around quite a bit as well. And then finally, the event log. This is where I spent quite a bit of time before, just looking at security events and just kind of analyzing some of them. And it stores them in a file under Windows System 32 Win Event and Logs. But there's also a separate event viewer utility that you can use to look through all the logs. But the security log, so successful login or failed logins, there's log on with explicit credentials, and that number there is the event log value, the identifier for it. So you can actually do a search on that. So like if you wanted to find all successful logons on a specific computer, you could search through the security log for event 4624. System would be kind of your system login information, or your system log. So if something crashes, it would go in there. If a update failed, it would go in there. Applications, that's going to be for application specific. It's not going to be all applications, but definitely all Microsoft applications. And a lot of times it will also, all services will typically have an application entry as well. So if you have some program which gets installed and runs in the services, anytime that something happens to that service, then that would end up getting logged. All of these you can, as a developer, write to be able to write to specific logs. Some things like the security log you may not be able to directly write to, but application, you can create your own entries in application. And there is quite a bit of other locations and folders inside of the event logs that end up getting displayed. And we'll look at a couple of those as well just because it is useful to look through the event log, and it does have quite a bit of useful information. So again, just key takeaways. The registry records installed users or installed software, USB devices, recent files, network connections, all sorts of information. Prefetch files will store program executed information, how many times, when, from which drive, etc., etc. LNK files will have the file path, timestamps, volume serial, MAC address, and then there's activity or event log, which will have like security events, log on, process create, as those can be used to build a timeline for when things have happened, what has happened, and that sort of stuff. And so using all four of those will create a strong corroborating evidence with a timeline, and inconsistencies across there can kind of indicate that, hey, someone's trying to delete the information before someone else looks at it.